Hi, Oz, Eloise, Will, thank you so much for joining me to have a crafty beer, talk specifically about the time that we got together to create something which has actually become one of our most successful programs, the Oz and Monaco Drink to Music. And obviously it came about, I remember, Will, you and I were actually in a cafe, not a pub, and we were trying to find new ways in which we could engage with audiences who might not have gone to a classical concert before. And then I wrote to you, Oz, and rather unexpectedly, you responded. Do you have any regrets about responding?
I think my doctor has a regret because my liver count has never been the same since. But otherwise, I have absolutely no regrets at all. I have found the most wonderful bunch of drinking colleagues that I could ever possibly imagine. And you basically...
Who are they?
These are the people like, when we've done a concert, I leave and say, I've got to go now, Christopher. It's that lot. but it's... And also because I think I came from a musical background and then just sort of lost touch with it, and the wine thing became more and more important, and mucking about on television and everything, and it was as though there was this string going back to my days as a chorister and a singer, and at Oxford and Monteverdi and all this stuff, which the string was getting very thin indeed. And if it could easily have snapped, and I'd have just lost that musical contact altogether. But luckily, you wrote to me, and I just had a most desperately, frankly, drunken evening with Jeremy Summerlees, which of course is a thoroughly bad idea at best of times. And at 3 or 4 in the morning, we had decided that someone had to do something about music and wine, and nobody was. And a week later, your letter came through, and it was literally a case of, are you going to go out of your comfort zone and back to something you absolutely love and has been so much an important part of your life, or are you going to sit on your backside and say, I can't be bothered? And unfortunately for you, I got off my backside and said I would love to get involved.
And the rest is history. So, I mean, Will, your grasp on literature is phenomenal, and your research on this matter is actually extensive. And I've got 2 questions. What were the greatest things that you uncovered in your research on this matter? And how much of the final script was actually simply made up?
Well, I think you all know the answer to what was my greatest discovery, because it was undoubtedly this fantastic duet by Dr. Cook, which this extraordinary thing. So perhaps for people who are not in the know, it's worth explaining that this is the sort of climax of the first program, and was a piece that actually, as far as I'm aware, hasn't had a modern performance until we dug it up. And it's a very apt piece. It's all about wine. It's all about a particular gentleman who retired from music and became a wine merchant. But what is extraordinary is that it's a pretty terrible piece of music. And I think that was apparent to us when we first discovered it and started playing through it.
And I don't think our performance does it any justice.
But I demur, because actually, for whatever reason, this brings the house down every night. The audience loved this piece. Explain, I don't know. So that has always given me a great deal of satisfaction, because it also, I think, we're here to bring new audiences to unforgotten gems. So that their mission accomplished. But as in terms of the what went into the show and the content of it, so much of it is me taking extensive notes after long conversations with Oz. It's often a question of giving Oz enough, I don't know if the word is rope, but allowing him to go off on one, and then get your ears open and try and take notes. And actually, I think the sort of ethos of the performances that we do, what we're trying to recapture for the audience is what you and I experience, Chris, when we're in a pub with Oz and something triggers an extraordinary memory or an anecdote or some historical fact, and we just sit back and, you know, we just turn Oz on, as it were, and let him run, and are entertained. And I think that's what we're trying to recapture for the audience, the experience of putting some half decent booze into Mr. Clarke and just hearing him talk.
That's very true. And obviously everything is true in the whole script. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, as far as I'm aware, yeah. Oz says it is.
Oh, so it must be. Good, brilliant. Eloise, very simple question for you. Any regrets?
Oh, every day, Chris, every day. I just, you know, I'm absolutely delighted to be a part of this project. It's been an absolute delight from start to where we are now. It's not even finished because we're thinking on and on and on about other projects we can do, and other ideas keep coming in. But no, it's just really been great to work with Oz and Will and yourself, and make great music whilst drinking. I mean, surely that is what every musician's dream is, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's great. And also, as said before, you know, the wonderful thing about the show is that fourth wall is completely demolished, and really the audience gets to be a part of the whole celebration of drink and music.
Absolutely. I mean, it should be said that we're actually here together to mark a very important point. Only next week we are going to be recording our first ever concert, live concert at social distance, and being broadcast a week later, Purcell's Dado and Nis. And a week or so later, we're actually going to be recording the entire first program of Oz and Monaco Drinks and Music, being sponsored by Roger Medwell, and gifting it to our audience. And that is how we're going to be carrying on doing our concerts for the time being. So to make music live with you guys, I'd love to say I'm really looking forward to it. I'd really love to say that.
Thanks.
So, Eloise, just bringing these elements together was sometimes challenging and often chaotic, but can you remember those first rehearsals?
I can actually, yes. Yes, it was, because we had obviously script which Will, you know, expertly put together, but we hadn't actually all got together to really kind of workshop it properly. And I remember that there wasn't that much time to put everything together before the first performance, but the chemistry just worked, I think, with everyone, and we just threw ourselves into it, and just we knew we were onto a good thing, I think, from the start. And I just think the mix of characters and the music, everything, it just sort of came together really beautifully, I thought.
Absolutely. I mean, it was quite a surprise to all of us, I think.
It was.
So, Oz, not many people know this. You've already mentioned it briefly, but you are actually a singer, and that's how you started life. You know, indeed, you actually sing a little bit of bass in this program. You were a cathedral chorister, then you went to the Monteverdi Choir, you know, one of the world's greatest choirs, and then you went to the West End. What went wrong?
I think that the musical world got tired of me. I thought I would be going on in a musical world for a long time. I think one of the things was when you do even a few concerts with John Eliot Gardner, you get a very firm understanding of your relative lack of excellence very quickly. Although I have to say I got on extremely well with John Eliot, and every criticism that he handed down was larded with humour, to the great joy of the bass line of the rest of the Monteverdi Choir, of course. And when I went into the West End, I started playing Sweeney Todd at Drury Lane. And if those kind of roles were available more than about once every generation, and if one could actually get them and perform them, I might have stayed on for much longer. But I was doing General Perron in Evita, and I did it for 18 months. And I think I crucially did it for a few months too long. And if I'd left at about 12 months, I think I would have left with all my confidence and enthusiasm together. But the last 6 months, I sort of lost my confidence, lost my enthusiasm, lost my desire to go into the theatre. And if you're losing all those sorts of things, you really need to get out and take some time off. So I did. I went and sat in my garret kitchen and I wrote my first book, which was called Sniff, Gurgle and Spit.
And then you went on to become the world's greatest wine writer. I mean, everywhere I go, somebody's heard of you, or they're chasing you for money, or something
That's
like that.
mostly what it is.
Yeah, every
Oh, it's
second-hand bookshop I go to, there's one of your books.
I know. And in fact, can I just say, John Lewis selling a very good book of yours, which I purchased only yesterday. So even now, old and new, you're around.
My mother, you, Will, not Christopher as well. No, just my mother, you, and Will. That is tripling my book sales this year.
I like to do my bit. I'm
so grateful. Even though Will,
it's now a fitting time to ask, what is your tip? This is obviously going out at 1 minute past 6. What are you drinking this evening?
Me, well, we met in 2015.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that our first show was in 2016, just almost exactly 4 years ago. So for 2015, I've chosen an English Pinot Noir from Bolton.
Ah, yes.
Right down by Brighton, and it's
local to where I bought it.
Pinot Noir than anyone else in England. Lovely lady called Sam makes it, and I just thought, since that's the year that Chris and I met, I could choose some foreign stuff from 2015, but I thought, no, I will choose something from the Albion in which we all live and love to live. So here it is. It's a Sussex Pinot Noir. And it smells jolly nice.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you very much.
Young, because normally Christopher and you and I drink nothing. Actually, before I think Churchill went to South Africa, is that right?
Yeah,
something like that. Anyway, normally
that leads me rather neatly onto my next question. So this is what I'd like you all to answer, because we make a claim in the show that music improves wine and vice versa by 82.5%. Is this true? So, Will, why don't you start? Is it true, do you feel?
I think actually, from my extensive notes here, I think your facts are incorrect, and if I can just correct you, one's pleasure is increased by a mere 15%. But I would imagine, given a half decent wine, one could up that percentage.
True. And Eloise, have you any thoughts on the matter?
I just feel the same. I would say 95%. But,
really?
But if that's, I would actually. I go pretty high. But no, I think absolutely. I think it really does add to the satisfaction of drinking, definitely.
And I think that with Will and Eloise, their performances are so sublime that I think wine only adds 2 to 3%. It's almost impossible to get better than I get them.
When you're already at 100, where can you go? Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Unfortunately, when Christopher starts tinkling the ivories, although they're not very ivory, but when he starts trying to find out what key his harpsichord is in, I reckon that the moment you strike the keys, Christopher, wine improves my enjoyment of your playing by 98%.
I thought you were going to say it would drive you to drink, but then I suppose
I'll take
that happened from the first moment he set foot in the White Horse pub and said, "I've got a project. Let's talk about it." And I said, "Make that 4 pints."
I think we drank them all. So anyway, final question before we get onto our bizarre quickfire round. I'd just like to know that your favourite story or section from the 2 shows that we created. Obviously, another one is currently under construction. In fact, Dr. Towers, how is that going?
Brilliant. But almost finished.
Induced coma.
So what is it? So actually, Towers, as you wrote it, what is your favourite story or section from the programme so far?
Oh gosh. Well, I think for me the bit I find most satisfying is the extended sort of section about the Rhine, because the Rhine connects up so many of the strands and the composers that we were looking at, and actually ties together lots of the information that I garnered on a field trip, including this fantastic bottle of Beethoven Riesling Brut, and this extraordinary bottle of Hildegard von Bingen, something like that. Spätleser Trocken, and that because actually, I went to a lot of the places that we speak about in the show, and actually experienced firsthand, walked among these old vineyards that was actually still inside city walls, and it was a wonderful experience, actually. And I think that that part of the show, when we try and evoke that and talk about the music associated with those regions, those composers, that I find that very evocative
And nostalgic, I imagine. So,
Yeah.
you, Eloise.
I like good old-fashioned humour, which is dotted throughout the show. But there's a particularly, I wouldn't say gruesome, but quite disgusting story towards the end in regards to the transport of wine from Cadiz to Argentina, which I don't want to give away. But if anyone goes to the show, they can look forward to that little morsel at the end. It's very funny.
And what about you, Oz? What's your favourite moment?
Don't think about pigs, from what I remember.
Yeah.
Well, I've got several. If we're talking about the first show, just let me. Are we talking about the second show as well?
Any show.
Just the moments then in the second show when Carlos von Buren flings off his Baroque cloak, whips out his harmonica, and screams his way into the second half of Roll Over Beethoven by Carlos von Buren.
Actually, that's my favourite bit too.
The sheer delight that we've managed to pull off this feat, this trick, this joy in the middle of, at the end of our wonderful classical concert is fabulous. But in the first show, I go on a bit at the beginning, and we've been trying to cut it for the last 4 years, and somehow we never quite managed to cut enough. But then there's that moment when I think the cello just begins to play and everything becomes still. And then Eloise begins to sing her Hildegard. And there's a fabulous moment of transformation that we've saying we've taken you along one path. Now, this is where we're going to go.
And you know what's really fascinating is that often for the audience, like when we were at the Cheltenham Festival, and they said most of the audience were new to classical music tonight. And that piece of Hildegard is actually the first piece of classical music they hear in the whole programme. And just sensing through the atmosphere how totally mesmerised and in awe of this extraordinary sound coming from Eloise's lips. Is quite emotional, actually, and very, very moving. And it sets us up for the rest of the program, because I know we've got a lot of jokes in the program, but there's actually a lot of serious and very moving stories and very informative, fascinating information. And to me, you know, I agree with you, absolutely. It's a very tender moment. And I also, like Eloise, I love the sort of the blunt humour that is also in there. And the story of how Gluck died is one delivered in a French accent, which for a German is quite interesting. It is one that always has me laughing without fail. So now, a little quick fire round now to finish off with. One for each of you. Oz, you've got to choose one of these. Soprano or countertenor, your favourite voice?
Oh, God.
What's it worth? That was a cackle, wasn't it, rather?
You're rehearsing for Dido next week.
That is such a difficult question, because having come through a cathedral background at Canterbury, and people like Alfred Deller were ex-choir boys there, and having listened to people like James Bowman when I was a kid, and Mark Deller, I think, as well. I have to say, I think the countertenor voice, now that I'm a bit older, is one of the most thrillingly unreal but emotionally taxing sounds that the human being can make. The noise that Will Towers makes, of course, is entirely different. But
I was going to say, do you know any good ones?
Asking me, do I know any good ones? No, I think we'll have to stick with him, because he bakes well.
Very
But it is interesting because I love the soprano voice, but I think that the countertenor voice is rare and unique, and something which we take pleasure in continuing to support in this country, and many countries' music don't.
Totally. So now, Will, choice for you. Obviously, taking into account that Dr. Clarke is a bass, soprano or bass.
Honestly, you're trying to start a fight, aren't you? I can see it. Well, soprano. I think actually, I can't justify it.
But it's no different if I asked you guys, okay, harpsichord or cello, you say cello, harpsichord or violin, it'd be violin, harpsichord or flute. So I know where it would all go the other way around. So now, Eloise, countertenor or bass?
Oh, how did I see that coming? You do want us to do a show together again, right? You know, you want us all to kind of get on.
I thought of so many ways of drawing it to a close.
Well, I feel that, you know, to be fair, it should be a bass, shouldn't it? I mean, countertenor and soprano has already been mentioned, so I feel
Very good.
We've covered it.
Very good indeed.
Politics.
I know, right?
Okay, here's the next question for you all: red or white? Eloise, why don't you answer first?
Red or white? Oh, I see. I'm with you. Sorry, that was I thought.
Wine specialist.
Yeah, we're talking about wine. Yes, wine. Yes. For me, it's white. I'm a hardened at the moment Sauvignon Blanc drinker, but I'm branching out, and now I've bought Oz's new book. Available at all good retailers that are open. It's going to give me much more of an education in other whites and reds that I can enjoy.
Okay, and Will, what is yours? I'm actually not sure I know yours.
Oh, it's got to be rosé. It's camp. No. But I'd say red actually. I think red. I like red has more complexity to me.
And Oz, I suspect red.
I'm sure it's red. I often drink white for greater immediate pleasure and enjoy it enormously. And I absolutely agree with Eloise. A good Sauvignon Blanc is often just the perfect drink when the weather's warm, and when the emotions are running high, as they always are when I'm with Eloise, obviously. But the emotions are running very low when I'm with you, Christopher. But I would say red, and partly because we've had so many creative sessions, and I'm looking forward to having so many more, which are largely based on me raiding the cellar and bringing out whatever is oldest and filthiest, and you and I gradually extracting these crumbled corks from these poor wrecks of the vintner's trade, and getting immense pleasure from the fact of their age, of what the world is now, what the world was then, how little Will Towers is drinking of it, and how much there is left for us. They have old bottles of red with you. I must admit, have given me enormous pleasure over the last few years. Younger bottles of red have given me enormous pleasure with Professor Towers, and obviously flagons of Sauvignon Blanc will give me enormous.
That's how I knew that there wasn't going to be a short answer to that question. And finally, in the first program, we get to realise that Purcell died after a big binge one evening, and possibly of hypothermia, because his wife refused to let him in because he was drunk. And Gluck died after his doctor told him if he had one more drink, Mr. Gluck, you will die. He had one more drink and he died. So my final question to you all is, to depart this earth like Purcell or like Gluck? So, Oz, why don't you answer first? Can you make it short?
Okay, I think I would depart like Gluck, partly because I prefer his accent, but partly I would depart like Gluck, but in a barrel of the finest beer ever brewed by man in these wonderful isles of ours.
Absolutely. What about Dr. Towers? What do you think?
Yeah, I think go with Gluck. Like Gluck, because you'd be so insensible, you wouldn't, you'd be numb to anything.
Absolutely. And Eloise?
Oh yeah, Gluck all the way. Gluck all the way. Absolutely.
I mean, I love the way he so openly said that drinking this stuff gives me the inspiration to write these amazing operas, and writing these amazing operas give me great kudos and glory. And then that kudos and glory gives me loads of money for me to go and buy more booze for the whole cycle to begin again. And I think that's life, and what a way to go. So, but anyway, look, we have to end there. Thank you so much to Oz Clarke, Eloise Irving, and William Towers. Thank you so much for joining me for a Crafty Beer at 6:01. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time in person to do this all again. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.